You're listening to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast, a place for sex addicts to share their experiences of recovery, to help break the stigma, myths, and misconceptions of sex addiction. This podcast may contain topics of sexuality, sexual trauma, dysfunction, or other things that may be triggering, so listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. My name is Jason, I'm a sex addict, and I will be your podcast host for today. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to episode number 97 of the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. And this episode is an interesting one. We have an anonymous guest who asked to have his voice altered for the conversation. And I was really excited to try this out in post-production, so I had a lot of fun messing around with that. I decided to do a drop pitch.
I messed around with different settings and trying to find what still sounded decent.
There was ways that I could pitch up the voice
and make it sound really high,
or pitch it down super low. And actually, during post-production, it was interesting. I accidentally doubled up on the pitch adjustment
and made it super low.
And I'm really glad that I caught it before uploading this episode. But in keeping with the idea of anonymity, there were a few readings that I wanted to pick out, and one of them I believe I have used on the podcast before around Tradition 11. And this comes from the Green Book on page 94, Tradition 11. Our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, TV, and films. The 11th tradition serves as a guide to our groups and to the fellowship as a whole in our public relations. It also guides us as members when we are representing SAA in a public capacity or carrying the message to the sex addict who still suffers. In our public relations, we strive to make our existence and our message known so that sex addicts seeking help will know how to find us. At the same time, we strive to protect the anonymity of our members. And skipping down to the bottom of the page, it is our policy not to use our last names, or in many cases, to use an assumed name when we are representing SAA in the media. And for a lot of guests here on the podcast, we have changed people's names. Quite a few guests have used different aliases, but for this episode, we decided to call him Anonymous. Another piece that I wanted to read comes from the SAA Public Information Handbook, which was last done in 2016. And there are lots of different aspects about public information in this handbook, and this can be found on the ISO's service website, saa-iso.org. And I believe it's part of the website that is password protected, so you will need to get a username and password from the ISO. I'll leave information on how to do all that in the show notes if anyone is interested in checking it out. So, media or other public appearances. Speaking in public on behalf of SAA is significantly more challenging than most other public outreach activities. Because of public attitudes about sex addiction and the need to maintain personal anonymity, public appearances should be undertaken with great care and planning. Skipping down here, and this is on page 11 of the handbook. When appearing on TV, in films, or in photographs, members should avoid showing their faces. For members who have very distinctive and easily recognizable voices or accents, the broadcast media can apply voice-altering technology to reduce the likelihood of being identified. I did want to read that because of the sentence in there about using voice-altering technology, and I am really grateful that the software I use has that ability, so if anyone does want to be a guest on the podcast, but has been hesitant because of the possibility of their voice being recognized, just know that I have that ability to do this. And it was really fun to do the post-production editing on this. There were a few places where our voices were combined, so I couldn't quite split the voice filter, so sometimes my voice got
altered as well.
So yeah, I was really excited to do this episode. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the conversation that I had with Anonymous. Here it is. I hope you enjoyed it. Well, cool. I will get us started. This is a totally new type of episode for me. We have Anonymous here, and I am going to be altering his voice in post-production. So I've done a little bit of this on my own, testing out to see what my software can do. So this would be really, really awesome. Welcome to the podcast, Anonymous.
Thank you. Thank you.
So first off, how long have you been in program?
I've been in the program maybe around 9 months.
Okay.
Something like that, yeah. I actually tried coming like years ago before the pandemic. I tried coming to a few meetings and just, I don't know, I don't think I was done yet really. And took a couple more years of the addiction before I finally kind of came back this time around. And things are a little bit different now.
All right. So I did get to hear your first step, and I was really grateful for that. But before getting to that, do you feel comfortable sharing your circles, your inner, middle, and outer circle?
Yeah, sure thing. So my inner circle is any kind of porn, first off. Any kind of porn, and that's hardcore porn, softcore porn, any kind of like nude images. And another thing in my inner circle is just cheating on my significant other. Before I came into the program, I was just like a habitual cheater. I cheated on all my girlfriends and everybody. I just couldn't stay faithful. And so now I have that in my inner circle, is any form of cheating, on my whoever I'm with. And the other thing in my inner circle is prostitution. And that's kind of my disease. It was progressive. So, it started off with porn when I was really young, and it got more and more into acting out with other people. And then at a certain point, I got to habitually using prostitutes. And that's really like the biggest thing for me, is to stay off the websites, like going onto a prostitute website, like any kind of website that has like their ads or anything like that. Being on that and scrolling through that is inner circle for me. So that type of behavior. I would set up phone apps to like call these escorts. So I wouldn't call them from my phone. I would set up apps. There's like phone apps that you can get like a burner on your phone, but through an app. And I would download a bunch of these and kind of just have a bunch of phones open, contacting all these escorts. So any of that type of behavior is inner circle behavior for me. So that kind of sums it up, is all that type of behavior for me is inner circle. Middle circle for me is objectifying women. And, I do it every day. I see beautiful women every day. And I basically kind of, I'm also in my outer circle every day. I'm constantly in my outer circle.
Yeah.
But I'm basically in my middle circle every day, checking out women, kind of objectifying them, and I'm working on it. And I try to do the 3-second rule, I try to look away and not do it, but I do find myself objectifying women still. It's something that I struggle with, but it is, it's middle circle behavior. Another thing in my middle circle is masturbation. So obviously any form of masturbation to my inner circle stuff that I described, any kind of porn, any kind of scrolling through prostitute websites, that's going to be inner circle, right? So I can't masturbate to that.
Yeah.
But if I masturbate, it'll be to my own images in my head.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's kind of a middle circle behavior for me. And what I kind of find interesting is sometimes certain things that are in the middle circle can kind of like bleed out into the outer circle. And vice versa. Some things that are in the outer circle can kind of bleed back into the middle circle. So like masturbating for me, it's usually in my middle circle, but sometimes it can be kind of healthy. Same with in my middle circle, social media is in my middle circle. Social media can be very triggering. It can be very toxic at times, but then other times it can be a nice way to kind of blow off steam or find a nice, I like art and stuff on social media. There's like artists and things like that that I find useful. So vice versa from the outer circle, there's certain things that are in my outer circle that can kind of push me into my middle circle, which would be like, my family.
Yeah.
My family of origin. I consider spending time with them outer circle, but they can be very triggering and they can be, just my family of origin. There's a lot of trauma involved with that.
Yeah.
So there's times where they can be triggering, right? So it's like kind of sometimes things in the outer circle can bleed into the middle circle and vice versa. I think also, I guess in my middle circle, I don't consider it a slip if I'm not actively trying to go to like strip clubs or sex shops. Like if that's not something that I seek out. That's not somewhere that I go to, that I'm not hanging out there. But if I accidentally or somehow mosey into one of those places, I think I would first, kind of like assess what's going on. Then I would kind of stop and I think I would leave pretty quickly. But I don't consider that a slip, I don't consider that like a relapse. It's like middle circle behavior. So I just kind of try to watch where I'm at and, be wary of what I'm doing. So I guess that's the middle circle. My outer circle consists of praying and meditating. I have a very strong meditation practice.
Nice.
Yeah, so I meditate. I try to meditate every morning and at night. I stick to that pretty religiously, but sometimes I get busy. But I try to meditate as much as I can. That's a huge part. Music is a huge part for me. So I play several instruments and just playing music, in any form. I like to sing. I like to, express myself vocally, and it's very cathartic. It really helps me connect with my higher power. I know I've heard you talk about how music can connect you to your higher power.
Totally.
Yeah, and so making music, listening to music has helped me kind of get out of some dark places recently. I've put on like the right music, when you get the right vibe, you put on the right music and it just kind of transcends and puts you into a different place and it's healing, it's like super healing. It's like medicine for me. So just listening to music and then making music, I make myself these little songs and nobody's gonna hear them, but I hear them and I like them. So
Nice.
it's cool. Yeah. Physical activity, working out, going for jogs, going for hikes, being out in nature. Nature is a big one for me.
Yeah.
Just, the ocean is huge for me. Just being out at the ocean, being at the beach, being by the water is huge for me. And that's also just connects me to my higher power. So I really, really enjoy that type of, going out into nature and being one with nature and meditating out in nature.
Nice. Yeah.
Meditate out in nature. I try to read as much as I can. I read a lot of program material and I read a lot of just recovery stuff. So I'm an alcoholic as well. And so I'm in AA. I've been sober from alcohol for a little bit of time. I've been longer than I've been from this addiction. So I've been in AA for a while now. I really just get really big into the big book, into the 12 by 12 and now the green book. And I just try to read as much as I can and try to absorb as much information as I can, just in general, like overall. But then for recovery, I try to do it every day. So I'm basically reading stuff about recovery every day. And that really helps me stay focused. And then just fellowship, building a fellowship. I call one guy every day I'll send one, I'll try to reach out to one guy every single day and just try to have a good conversation with one fellow every day. And that's really helped me and really been going well. And I try to meet with my sponsor once a week. Sometimes our schedules don't align, but
Yeah.
for the most part, we really get together and work the steps and are really focused on getting the steps done. So just fellowship and then meeting with my sponsor. And I think those are just, all that stuff is what's keeping me sober. And I try to stay in my outer circle every day, right? Like every day, at least do one thing in your outer circle. And I think you'll be good.
Yeah.
So that's my outer circle.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Just thinking about doing the step work, I mentioned earlier that I was fortunate to see one of your presentations for your first step. I know you did one in person and one on Zoom, and I was unfortunate that I couldn't quite make it to the in-person one, but I did get to catch your first step on Zoom. And so I was thinking about if you wanted to go over some of those types of things, how you grew up and what brought you to that point where you needed to come into program.
Yeah, sure. So I basically was sexualized as a child. When I was 5 years old, one of my first memories was this older boy. I was five. He was probably like seven, maybe eight, something like that. But he he told me, "I'm going to teach you sex today," and he performed oral on me. And I don't really remember exactly like the details, but I do remember, you know, we both kind of performed oral on each other,
Mm-hmm.
and that was my first sexual experience, and that really paved the path for the rest of my life of what my sexuality was going to be like. And I became kind of hypersexualized. So that was a one-off thing. But then I kind of continued doing it with other kids. There was one other boy around maybe a few years later that I kind of started doing the same thing with, and we kind of did it for a few times. A few times we would just perform oral on each other, and just basically anytime I was around other kids, I would try to, boys and girls, whoever was around, I was just super hypersexual. Anytime I was around other kids at that age, I would try to, get them naked and see their private parts and
Yeah.
try to do all that. And I got a little older. I was maybe like 10, 11, 12-ish, right? Like a little, like preteen age. And I started hanging out with this older kid, this older teenage boy, and he had porn. So he started showing me porn. I don't think he was the first person to ever show me porn. I think I had like found a Playboy magazine somewhere before, so that, I had seen like a Playboy magazine and stuff like that. But this was the first experience where this guy, he had like DVDs and he had like Cinemax or whatever, HBO or stuff like that. And so we would start watching porn together, and we started same thing, just performing oral on each other, and it became kind of like an abusive relationship where he was older than me, so he was really taking advantage of me, and he knew that I was really into the porn, so he would just kind of like always supply me with porn and, get me to hang out, and we would hang out and we would do that. And that lasted a few years, and up to like, I think probably like maybe high school, then it stopped, and I just kind of stopped talking to that guy and just kind of stopped associating. I started hanging out with my own high school. He was older, so I just started hanging out with like people my own age and stopped hanging out with him. And it really warped my concept of sex. And it really damaged my sense of like intimacy, because there was no like, through all that, there was no like intimacy, there was no like connection. It was all just based on like gratification and
Yeah, based on the act.
yeah, based on the act. That's a good way to put it. So basically, the rest of my youth, I just was hypersexual. In high school, I masturbated to porn like addictively,
Yeah.
and I knew at that point, I knew in high school at a certain point that I had a problem. Like I knew that I was addicted to it. Like I could tell. And I think that was the first time, because I realized I was an alcoholic, like at a certain point. Like I was like, wow, like I know what it feels like to be addicted. Like I am in active addiction of this alcohol. Like I am an addict. Like if I know what it is, I can feel it. It's there. And that was the first time with porn. That was the first time where I was like, oh, I'm addicted. Like I have no control over this thing. I have no power. And I guess it's before the whole program first step, right? Like, but I knew like I have no power over this. Like I have no control over this. Like I'm addicted to this. So that was the first time I ever came to that realization. And I would masturbate every day, and I would just masturbate habitually. And I I had a really bad moment where I got basically the girl of my dreams, my high school, this girl I was dating in high school, and she was just, I was like so infatuated with her, and I was gonna say I was in love with her, but I wasn't in love with her. I was just obsessed with her, you know. I was just sexualized her, and I was just obsessed with her. And we were gonna have sex, and we hadn't had sex at that point, and we were gonna have sex, and I had her in my bed, and we were fooling around, and then when it came time to have sex, I had erectile dysfunction, and I couldn't get up, like at all, like not even a little bit, and I was just mortified, and that was like the end of the relationship. She took it very personally, and she just didn't put up with it, And I mean, rightfully so, right? We were like young and in our prime, and she just wasn't expecting that, and she just didn't tolerate it, and I was just mortified, and I knew it was because of my porn addiction, and I didn't stop, I just continued. I continued doing it, you know. I just for years and years, I continued doing that. So I got to college, and in college, I was still, a porn addict. And in college, I started, partying a lot and just drinking a lot, partying a lot. And, I just, like, it was just college hookup culture. I was just hooking up with lots of random girls and lots of one night stands and just, whatever, meaningless sex. And at the same time, just dealing with my porn addiction. And so when I got out of college, I started living on my own, and I started going to strip clubs, and I would, get real drunk, and I would go to strip clubs. And that was kind of like whatever, like the way that I had fun or whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember one day leaving the strip club, and I just felt like I needed more, Like I had seen all the beautiful women in there, and I needed more, like it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
So then I, that was my first experience with escorts, where I just went online and I started Googling escorts. And that was the first time that I found an ad, and I called someone over to have sex with me. And the person came over, and it was really late at night, And I remember we had agreed on like $175, like that was the agreed upon rate. And then when she got there, um she's like, oh no, it's 275. And then I was like, okay, whatever, like even though we had agreed upon it, I said fine, like, so I paid her the 275, and then we did the thing. And I just remember like that first feeling of like, oh, like feeling duped a little bit, right? Like she hustled me, she hustled me a little bit. But from the beginning I felt guilty about it and shameful about it. But that was just the beginning. That was like the start. That was like the seed that got planted. So once I knew that, you could go online to do that, it just went crazy. I started going on the websites. There was websites specifically for that, for finding escorts.
Mm-hmm.
And I would scroll through these websites. It was weird. It was like a game that I would play. I would like look at all these images, and I would like masturbate to all these images, but then I would like start calling the numbers, and like almost like seeing like how far could I get? Am I gonna go all the way, or am I not gonna go all the way? And I would just call these numbers, and like sometimes I would like go through with it and do it and then go do the thing, and then sometimes I would just like masturbate and then climax, and then like it was just like the weird, like the chase of it. And it became just such a habitual, like addictive thing of me doing this, of me just chasing and just chasing after these prostitutes. I started getting real I don't know, it was like I was in and out, so I would flake on these girls sometimes,
Yeah.
like I would flake on them. And it got to the point where they'd block my number or whatever. And then I think that's where a little bit later, I think at that point it hadn't started, but a little bit later on in my disease, that's when I started doing the burner phone apps, because I would push these girls to like blocking me, and then I would just create a new phone and then contact them from a different phone number, and then yeah, I would just hit them up from a different phone. So I was just so desperate to get sex in any way that I could that I was doing the escorts, but then I was also doing Craigslist. I would go on Craigslist and find ads on Craigslist.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I would do the Craigslist casual encounters, which isn't around anymore. Like it's not a thing anymore, but it used to be a thing. So I would go on and I would find these ads, and there was no there was no like there was no women on there. Like if there was a woman on the ads, it was like a scam,
Yeah.
being hustled or like something like that. It wasn't real. There was no like real women on there looking for sex. It was all gay men and transsexuals. So I tried finding women on there. Like I would try finding women on there, but like I said, there was just it wasn't real. Like there was no real women on there. But then I kind of started just seeing, like, I guess let's see what's up with these transsexuals. Like let's see. I guess I don't know. I just needed something, right? I just needed a hit. And let's say, like the prostitutes that I was trying to get had all kind of shut me off. And so I wasn't able to get any of the prostitutes to come, like the female prostitutes. So then I was using casual encounters. And so then I started trying to meet up with these, transsexual, transvestite people. And that kind of started there. I did meet up with a few of those people, and I did have encounters. And so then I just kept doing that and trying to get, female prostitutes to come see me. But then, like I said, just alienating them and just creeping them out. At a certain point, I think I just discovered that there was on the websites, like for the prostitutes, there was like a transsexual section, like that was one of the options. So I would switch it to like the transsexual. I just started kind of fooling around with that. And that kind of became the main thing, was I was doing that on casual encounters like so much. And then once casual encounters went away because they got rid of it, I still wanted to see transsexuals.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then I started just seeing them, the escorts, and just kind of being on the escort sites and seeing them that way. And I habitually just was so engulfed with that. It really was a bad addiction. I mean, I would leave work to go act out, and it was kind of like a vicious circle because stress was like a trigger for me. So I would get stressed from work, and I would be at work, and I just would get really stressed, and that's the way I would cope and deal with my stress was seeing these prostitutes. And I would literally be in the middle of work, go act out real quick, go see a prostitute, do my thing, and come back to work like nothing happened and be interacting with people and be doing my job.
Yeah.
And I got through my job like fine, like it's not like I got fired or anything like that, but I would literally go act out and then come back or go to the bathroom and be, I'd be at the bathroom sitting on the toilet, looking at ads. And it just really affected my life, affected my relationships. I couldn't maintain a relationship or any kind of intimate partner, for my whole life. But at that point, it was just really hard for me to be satisfied with one woman. And I only date women, and,
Yeah.
and I only am really like looking for like a partner, like a woman partner, and I am sexually attracted to women, but I just had this infatuation and this obsession with transsexual prostitutes that that's kind of what my kink was,
Yeah.
and it was so bad, I couldn't control myself. Like when it would kick on, when I would get triggered, and like I said, I quit alcohol, and like that was hard, but it wasn't that hard. Like I got it eventually. The sex thing, it was so like ingrained in me that just whenever I would get triggered, I would get knots in my stomach. I would get like chills.
Oh yeah.
I would get this like crazy feeling of like knots in my stomach, chills. I would like be shaky, like literally shaking, like a crackhead or something, right? Like I literally was like a fiend, like a full on fiend, and I would be shaking, and my gut would be wrenched, and I would just be like, I would get cold. I remember like it would be normal, it'd be like a normal temperature, and I'd be fine, and then all of a sudden I'd get triggered, and I'd have to go do my thing, and I would get like cold, like literally cold. It was like a physiological thing that would happen to me where I would just like completely change physiologically and
Yeah,
physiologically.
totally.
It would take over, and I would just have to go do it, and I would have to complete the act. I mean, it was miserable. It was absolute hell. It was really, really bad. And like I said, I tried coming to SAA before, and I don't know, I kind of psyched myself out of it. I was like, oh no, I just told myself, I'm like, like I don't need this. And, like, it's fine. Once I get sober from alcohol, then there'll be no need to, like, but I was so wrong. It was so, the sex addiction was, they would fuel each other, like I would
Yeah.
drink and then I'd act out, and then I'd act out and I'd feel shitty, so I would drink. And so they fueled each other. It was a vicious cycle. But ultimately, what I discovered is that the sex addiction was like the real underlying thing for me. Like that was the thing that was driving the bus, that was driving everything. All my addictions, all my trauma, all my everything, the way I acted, the way I was, it was driven by like my childhood sexual trauma and then driven by my sex addiction. That was the main addiction that I had. That was what was driving the bus.
Did you use alcohol to kind of cover up the pain there?
I would use alcohol to numb the pain.
Yeah.
And it was a vicious cycle because alcohol would make me act out like uncontrollably. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
when I was drunk, all I wanted was sex, like just nonstop. So it was just a vicious cycle. And so that was when I was drinking and acting out, that was like really, really miserable. It got better as far as like I wasn't drinking, but I was still acting out. But it wasn't as miserable, but it was still pretty miserable. So I came to SAA and I just didn't stick around and I just kept on acting out. And then finally I just so I got a CSAT
Mm-hmm.
and she's saved my life. Like I owe all this to her because she's the one that really pushed me to go to SAA. She's the one that really guided me through this process. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have done it. And I don't know where I'd be or what would have happened to me. I really was. For me, it really is like a life or death thing where I was suicidal.
Mm-hmm.
I was like full blown suicidal when I was trapped in my addiction. Just trapped. That's the only way I saw out. Like I was miserably depressed. I was just going crazy, just feeling psychotic. And I contemplated suicide a lot. I think had I not been able to overcome all my addiction and work through my trauma, I think that's how I would have gone. I think that's what would have happened to me. And so this really is like a life or death disease for me personally. So that's why I say, she saved my life because I've been able to work through my trauma with her. And she got me into the rooms, and the rooms have saved my life because just working with these men, working with my sponsor, being in the rooms, being vulnerable, and doing this work is what has kept me sober when nothing else worked. Like nothing else was working, and I was just spinning my wheels, going nowhere. And finally, there was a solution that worked for me. And it was kind of crazy because it was the same solution that got me sober from alcohol. It's like, now it's just the same thing,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the same thing, doing it again, but in a different flavor. I don't know. I feel like I've grown leaps and bounds, like as a person, but spiritually, I really do feel connected to God, like I came into recovery, I came into AA and I came into all this like an atheist, I would classify myself as an atheist. And now I define it in my own terms and I define it in my own way, but I really do have a connection to God. And that I think is what has kept me sober and what has saved my life is finding that true connection to my higher power, to my God. And that's why, when I meditate, it's not just meditating by itself, even if you're not spiritual, can be really productive as far as just like clearing your mind and bringing you grounding and peace. But for me, I meditate and I connect to something spiritual. And that spiritual connection is what is keeping me sober. And I feel it when I meditate and I feel it through the group, being with a bunch of other sex addicts, being with a bunch of other people in my position. It brings something spiritual. And I just thank God for, I was thinking about it today and I thank God that I found this program and that I found these people because, I mean, otherwise it would have been it's just really, really bad for me. It's a nightmare with, the other way. The other life that I was living was just an absolute nightmare. And now I have a solution,
Yeah. Yeah. So you just did your first step a few months ago, and I was wondering where you are on your step journey right now.
So I'm on my fourth step, and I think that's kind of like the meat and potatoes right there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a big one.
I've already started really working on it and doing a lot of work on it. but we've only kind of scratched the surface. Like there's so much to work through.
Yeah, yeah.
And I guess when I did my fourth step for AA, and I kind of just focused on these big resentments that I had towards my family
Yeah.
and this trauma, this family of origin, generational trauma type of thing, right? So it was like the members of my family. I did these big resentments for them, and it was kind of just like a few people, just them, and then it was good. I worked through it, and I was able to kind of overcome my generational family trauma,
Yeah.
and that helped a lot. But now it's like kind of everybody else, and I have this huge list of resentments. Like I guess I wasn't focused on it as much last time,
Yeah.
but this time around, I have like a list, like just a laundry list of just so many resentments, and just working through all of them is going to take forever. But I'm really happy that I get to do it because thoroughness is, I think, the key this time around. You know, like being very very thorough. Me and my sponsor are taking our time with it. You know,
Good.
and I think just being as thorough as possible is really kind of what I'm going for this time. And it's a lot of people. It's like there's like so many people from work that I resent, you know, that
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
that I resent a lot, you know, and I have to really work through it and you know, do the whole thing, see where my character defects come into play, see what my part is, right? Like I'm not the best worker either, you know, so it's part of my, you know, looking at myself. And I don't know, I love doing the steps, you know. I think people that fail in this program are people that don't want to really examine themselves.
Yeah.
The people that can't admit to themselves, you know, certain things. It's people with big egos and a lot of pride, you know. And so I think when you put your ego and you put your pride away a little bit, that's when you can really start dissecting your inner stuff and really
Yeah.
start working through all that. Yeah, I really enjoy I enjoy doing step work. Like I really do. I enjoy seeing like what's up with me, right? What's under the hood with me. So that's where I'm at. And it's kind of interesting because I'm in parallel programs. I'm doing AA step work as well. So in AA, I'm more advanced where I'm doing amends. So I'm making AA amends. So I'm doing, you know, I'm already doing amends for AA, but then it's going to be a different set of amends for SAA. So I'm almost like kind of like doing my AA alcohol related amends, but then I'm kind of saving some for when I kind of get to the SAA part. So it's kind of like I'm doing two different programs at the same time, but they're the same thing kind of. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So it's cool. I just do a lot of step work and this whole thing, you know, my addiction is all just kind of it's one big thing. And I'm just changing. I'm just changing as a person.
Yeah, that's completely amazing. One of the things that we were talking about before we actually started recording was being of service and different levels of service work at the group level, the intergroup level, and the international level with the ISO. And so a lot of our meetings are having a point where service rotation is coming up. And we just spoke about this on the previous podcast episode on traditions 7, 8, and 9. And we were talking about service. And before we started recording, you were asking me about intergroup. What's the kind of the difference between intergroup and group service representative, GSR? And so were you thinking about doing other levels of service?
Yeah, I hear you talk about it a lot on the podcast, and I know that there's an open position at the meeting that I go to for both for GSR and for intergroup. And so I'm going to take one of those positions, just so I could be more of service and kind of
Awesome.
get more. Yeah, I'm going to take one of those positions. I don't think I want to do both, but
Yeah.
I'll take one. And yeah, I think just service keeps you sober. You know, I've heard that before. Service keeps you sober. And so I am looking to be more of service and to take on more roles and more positions. And I think that, you know, my group kind of needs it.
Yeah.
So I'm just here to kind of fill in some positions and just be of service. And, I think it helps my recovery as well.
Yeah, yeah. So some of the regular service positions that we have at the group level are typically secretary, treasurer, literature person, phone list, and that is for like the individual meeting. And then we have an intergroup rep who meets with here in the Bay Area, at least. We have our intergroup meeting the second Saturday of every month, and so each meeting has the ability to send an intergroup rep to our intergroup meetings and report back any news that we have from intergroup. A lot of times it's outer circle activities that are coming up. Sometimes in the summer we do picnics or hikes and things like that. And so we have news of things like that. Others are around trying to get contact information for meetings. So we have an intergroup rep report back to the meeting and say, hey, we need to update our information to intergroup. The GSR is, at least here in the South Bay, I am the Area 40 chair. So Area 40 covers the meetings from Pacifica down to Monterey, and that's the peninsula. And I think we go out as far east as Hayward. So Hayward had the choice of being an East Bay meeting or a South Bay meeting. And at that point, we were trying to get up to 20 meetings in the area. The Santa Clara meetings really increased. So I think in Area 40, we've got over 20 meetings now. Yeah. So what will happen with that, and I've been neglectful, like I was mentioning before we started recording, that as the Area 40 chair, I will call an area assembly where each group can send a rep to that. And we basically talk about things that concern the Bay Area meetings with the ISO. So each of our individual meetings. So October is the conference that happens where we vote on various things that affect SAA as a whole on a global level, changes to the Green Book, changes to Voices of Recovery and other literature, other types of structure. And so the group service representative will speak the voice of the meeting to the area assembly, and then our area assembly will send one representative to the October conference. And so I need, in addition to doing intergroup service work and the podcast service work, I also do that. And so I will be needing to schedule an Area 40 assembly pretty soon and gather all of our meetings together to discuss those types of things. So anyway, I like talking about it here on the podcast. So other people, it's like when we go to meetings, we just kind of think of our one little meeting, and that's all we're focused on. But there's usually other levels of networks that are involved. And so, yeah, I did want to answer that to you personally. And I thought it was an awesome point to talk about that we should have included it on this episode. So I'm glad that we brought that up.
Yeah, and I hear you talking about it, and I kind of got a little inspired because I want to share the message to like people all over the world,
Mm-hmm.
We have our own little microcosm here in the South Bay, and it's cool, and I'm involved, but I want to spread the message out to the rest of the country, and then maybe to the rest of the world,
Yeah.
So I think if I can get involved a little bit more, that would be really cool, because it's a real disease and people need to get the message,
Mm-hmm. Well, awesome. Yeah, I'm glad we circled back to that and included it here on the main part of the episode.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was going to ask you, and I think we had exchanged texts around this, was what made you feel compelled to share your story here on the podcast?
I want to help people,
Mm-hmm.
and I've heard similar stories to mine. I've heard people tell some pretty heartfelt stories and really touched me, and little pieces and parts of my story have been in people's story, But I have never heard somebody tell my story, like the way it is, and like really reflect it back to me. And so I really think what I hope is that this story reaches somebody who went through what I went through, and they can hear this and be like, wow, like I'm not alone. I don't have to be afraid. I can get through this, So my hope is that this reaches people that really need to hear this, and that they can find hope and that they can find recovery. So that's my goal, is just spreading my story and sharing my story so that people can relate, and people can have the courage and the strength to recover too, no matter what, whether they have my story or not. If someone could hear this and be like, you know what, like I can recover too, I really think it is very valuable.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, it's such an amazing gift to be able to have the courage to share your story here on the podcast and with other addicts in the rooms, and other addicts that are just finding the program through the podcast. So it's an amazing, amazing gift. And thank you so much for doing that, for stepping up.
Yeah, I thank you, Jason, because this podcast has actually really been a huge part of my recovery. I actually have listened to every single episode up to this point. So I basically kind of started listening to it right when I came in, and I listened to it all the time. And I've listened to every episode, and it's really amazing, like what you've done here, and what the podcast brings, because I've heard so many different stories, and it's all the same. It's like you said, it's normalizing this, and it's sharing with people, and it's bringing out messages, and it's growing recovery, and I think that's really awesome. And I'm glad I got to be a part of it. I'm glad that I got to share my story.
Well, was there anything else that you wanted to cover?
No, I think we covered everything.
All right. Yeah, Anonymous, I am so grateful that you were able to step up the courage and share your story here.
Thank you.
And I will see you on a meeting soon.
All right. Thanks, Jason.
All right. Awesome. Thanks so much.
Many, many thanks to Anonymous. And yes, he is someone that I know from meetings, and was really, really grateful for this opportunity to share his story. He did mention that music is a part of his recovery, so I do want to play some songs here at the end of this episode, including a few that are personal to him. But before getting to that, I wanted to share some comments that we got on the YouTube channel, as well as a review on Apple Podcasts. I'm just going to hit a few highlights that have occurred over the past few weeks. This one coming from episode number 77 with Aaron M. And the comment is, "This is one hell of a talk about the trauma trail." Indeed. I really wish I could have caught this on last week's episode. I saw the comment just after I had finished publishing the episode, but it comes from Darren F. in talking about the traditions, going back to episode number 86 on the Tradition Study Part 2. And he writes, "At the end of this episode, I challenged the listeners to add a brief moment during their meeting to allow comment about the tradition of the month. Have any groups started to incorporate this into their meeting?" And I can say for my group, we haven't done that per se, but over the past month, it's been really cool. A couple of people have picked readings from the traditions, and so we have had round the room discussion about various traditions as part of our regular group. But yeah, I love this idea and wanted to highlight that we can take time to talk about the tradition of the month more than just reading it. So yeah, really grateful for Darren on that one. And it's funny that just as I am recording this, I got a text message from one of my friends that says, "Loving the Traditions podcast." It's very timely. And it's been a while since I've talked about Apple Podcasts and ratings and reviews there. I just got this one in January, and I don't think I've really commented on it, but it says, "Made a mess of my life, but this podcast has been helping me see, learn, and understand. Please keep it coming." And yeah, I definitely will. Yeah, I'm not sure if I've read that on the podcast, but if so, it was worth mentioning. And if you feel so inclined, you can always leave us ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts. And I believe there's a way to do that on Spotify as well, but I don't use Spotify all that much. And just thinking of other podcast platforms, I just got a message that Stitcher will be ending its service very soon. So if you do listen to the podcast on Stitcher, that app will be going away. So back to what I mentioned during my conversation with Anonymous, we talked about the power of music in recovery. So I wanted to share a few songs here. I asked Anonymous if there were any special songs that he was currently listening to, and he mentioned the band Glass Animals. So first here, the song Poplar Street kind of reminds me of Robert Palmer's song Addicted to Love. It seems to glorify love addiction a little bit, but the lyrics do talk about being a love addict.
Watching all the world from high up in the trees. I saw Mrs. Mosley Brown with Mr. Keys. I feel like a new man, rain flowers in my bed, breeze straight through the crisp air, dead flowers in the sand. I am a true romantic, free falling love addict, and I am a true romantic, free falling love addict, yeah.
Such a cool groove. I love that. And the next song is called Cocoa Hooves. And I really love the mellow vibe of the intro here. And then as it moves on to this real groovy crescendo.
You know the way that I feel. Come on, you honey, you never fight back. Why don't you play with bows and arrows? Why don't you dance like you're sick in your mind? Why don't you set your wings on fire? Come on, you honey, why don't you play nice? Why don't you toy with sex and violence? Why don't you stay back into my huge eye? Why don't you
I love the low bass in this one. You might need good headphones or speakers to be able to hear the subsonic sounds, but man, so cool. So when Anonymous talked about connecting with nature, and especially the ocean, I thought of the Jane's Addiction song called Ocean Size. In my spiritual mix, I pair this with the song just before it on the album Nothing Shocking. The song is called Up the Beach. And these really remind me of great times that I had at the beach, as well as my connection with the ocean. And I wanted to read a few lyrics here before playing it. I was made with a heart of stone to be broken with one hard blow. I've seen the ocean break on the shore and come together with no harm done. So this is a little bit heavier than Glass Animals and the songs that I'm going to be sharing after this, but yeah, I love the connection with the ocean on this one. So here is Jane's Addiction, Ocean Size.
I was
And lastly, Anonymous mentioned music helping him to get out of some dark places, finding that right vibe to help transcend, and how that can be healing. I usually turn to the music of Hylung, but I will be sharing more of their music on one of the next few episodes, talking about music with throat singing, of which I have been practicing and learning how to do that. Anyway, lately I've been turning to the music of Agnes Obel, and like another song that I shared on episode 85 of the podcast, I found her music through the Netflix show called Dark, and her song called Familiar.
Took a walk to the summit at night, you and I, to bring home in the old crib with the familiar, you and I. And the time was opening wide, do or die. Under a mask of familiar, who and I.
I suppose that the others can't see. It's a danger every shade of us you can. It's okay. Let me decide who you are. Wanna be the villain of me. It's a danger. I suppose that the others can't see.
I absolutely love that. And in this version, it is her voice that is being layered and pitch shifted. When she performs it live, she does have a few other singers, including some male singers, to get to some of those low parts. But absolutely love that song. And I've also been watching a few different live session videos of hers on YouTube, and this song called The Curse. And this features Agnes on the piano and singing, and it also has a viola and cello. And it's really cool in the video to watch them loop a couple of the parts. I think it's mostly the viola that gets looped. This episode, it's been a while. And like I had mentioned on the previous episode, that for the 100th episode, I am inviting past guests and listeners of the podcast to join us on a recording. And the Zoom recording will be on July 18th. I did post an announcement on the Bay Area SAA.org website, and I will be leaving a link to that in the show notes. So if anyone is interested in taking part in that, please join us. So with all that, I am going to close out this episode. If you wanted to provide any songs like Anonymous did here that are part of your recovery process, or if you wanted to provide feedback for the podcast on any specific episodes or just in general, you can reach us at feedback@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. And if you wanted to get a hold of me to be a guest on a future episode of the podcast or have any questions about the program, you can email me at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. I'm so thankful for all of you listening. And as always, keep coming back. The views and opinions contained in the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Bay Area Intergroup or the ISO of SAA.